geographic records designate the stretch of Highway 277 running north from San Angelo, Texas, as a desolate corridor. It is a 4-lane artery that cuts through the brush and mesquite of Coke County, an area defined by its lack of illumination and sparse population density. The terrain surrounding the highway is rugged, characterized by wild hog habitats, rattlesnakes, and dense scrub, factors that would later complicate grid searches and forensic recovery efforts. According to meteorological data from the night of August 8th, 2013, conditions were clear, yet the moon phase provided minimal natural light, rendering the roadside pitch black outside the range of vehicular headlights. In the investigation into the disappearance of 26-year-old Brandon Lawson, this location serves as the primary evidentiary focal point. The procedural context of the case begins within the domestic sphere of the individual involved. Reports filed by the San Angelo Police Department indicate that earlier in the evening, Lawson was at his residence on the 1000 block of West 26th Street. Witness statements provided by his common-law wife, Ladessa Lofton, detail a domestic dispute regarding household situations and financial pressures. While the specific verbal content of this disagreement was not recorded, the outcome is documented in the timeline. Lawson departed the residence shortly before midnight. Investigators noted that at this specific juncture, Lawson possessed an active felony warrant for his arrest regarding possession of a controlled substance. This legal liability is cited in case files as a potential contributing factor to his subsequent behavior, specifically his reluctance to engage directly with law enforcement personnel. The timeline established by cellular data places Lawson traveling north on Highway 277. His vehicle, a silver Ford F-150 pickup truck, was, according to later mechanical inspection, low on fuel. The intent of his travel remains a subject of investigative theory, with statements suggesting he was heading toward his father's residence near Abilene. However, approximately 40 minutes into the drive, the journey was interrupted. Phone records indicate that at 12:38 a.m. on August 9th, Lawson initiated a call to his brother, Kyle Lawson. During this communication, Brandon stated that his vehicle had exhausted its fuel supply and was disabled on the roadside near Bront, Texas. This initial call set in motion a series of logistical responses. Kyle Lawson, along with his own spouse and their young child, mobilized to deliver a gas can to the stranded motorist. Simultaneously, Ladessa Lofton placed a phone call to Brandon. Records show this conversation occurred at 12:48 a.m. Lofton later told investigators that the connection was poor, a common issue in the region due to the limited coverage of cellular towers in Coke County. She reported that Brandon sounded agitated and mentioned that he was bleeding, though he did not disclose the cause of the injury or the nature of the incident that produced it. This detail represents the first forensic indicator of potential physical trauma in the case file. The pivotal piece of evidence in the Lawson file is the emergency call placed at 12:54 a.m. to the Coke County Sheriff's Office. The call was routed through a 911 dispatch center in a neighboring jurisdiction before being transferred. The duration of the call was brief, lasting less than 1 minute, and the audio quality has been the subject of extensive auditory analysis by both law enforcement and independent experts. The transcript is fragmented, with significant portions categorized as unintelligible due to a high noise floor, suggesting the presence of strong wind. In the recording, the dispatcher asks for the nature of the emergency. The voice, identified as Brandon Lawson, speaks in a rapid, breathless cadence. Audio technicians have isolated phrases referring to being in a field and needing the police. There are references to other individuals, though the exact phrasing is disputed. Some transcripts suggest he mentioned being chased, pushing a truck, or just pushed some guys over. The phrases, "just a guy" and "state trooper," are audible, though the context, whether he was seeing a trooper or requesting one, is ambiguous. Toward the end of the recording, Lawson asks for help, followed by a request for the medical response team before the line disconnects. The operator attempted to redial the number immediately, but received no answer. The device went straight to voicemail. The procedural response to this 911 call is a critical component of the timeline. A nursing home in Brant had also reported a call regarding a distressed motorist, and a passing commercial truck driver contacted law enforcement to report a vehicle parked haphazardly on Highway 277. Deputy Neal of the Coke County Sheriff's Office was dispatched to the scene. His patrol unit logs place his arrival at the truck's location at approximately 1:10 a.m. This arrival time is 16 minutes after the 911 call was initiated. Upon arrival, the deputy documented the scene. The silver Ford F-150 was found parked on the shoulder of the southbound lane. Despite Lawson having traveled north, the positioning of the vehicle, obstructing a portion of the white line, was noted as a traffic hazard. The hazard lights were not activated, the doors were unlocked, and the keys were not in the ignition. A visual inspection of the cab revealed that Lawson's cell phone charger was absent, suggesting he had taken it with him. However, the individual himself was not present at the immediate location of the vehicle. At this point in the investigation, the situation was treated as a stranded motorist call rather than a criminal investigation or a missing person case. The deputy utilized his spotlight to scan the surrounding brush and fence lines. The report states that visibility was severely limited. No contact was made. Simultaneously, the timeline of the family's arrival intersects with the law enforcement response. Kyle Lawson arrived at the scene shortly after the deputy. According to the deputy's statement, he observed Kyle Lawson's vehicle approaching. A brief interaction occurred where Kyle confirmed the truck belonged to his brother and explained the fuel situation. At this specific moment, a critical communication breakdown occurred. Kyle Lawson, aware of his brother's outstanding warrant, was hesitant to disclose that Brandon might be hiding in the brush to avoid arrest. Consequently, the deputy, assuming the driver had simply walked toward town for assistance or had been picked up by a passing motorist, did not initiate an immediate ground search. Records show that Kyle Lawson communicated with Brandon via phone during this interval. At 1:19 a.m., a call connected. Brandon allegedly told his brother, "I can see you," implying he was observing the scene from a concealed position in the darkness. He indicated he was in a field and reiterated that he was bleeding. This statement is consistent with the location data, which placed the phone's signal in the vicinity of the truck. However, despite the proximity, visual contact was never established. The presence of the law enforcement vehicle, with its lights activated, likely acted as a deterrent for Brandon to emerge, given his legal status. Following this conversation, communication ceased. Subsequent attempts to reach Brandon went directly to voicemail, indicating the device had either been powered down or the battery had been depleted. The deputy cleared the scene, placing an orange sticker on the abandoned truck to mark it for towing, if not removed within the statutory timeframe. Kyle Lawson remained, attempting to locate his brother, but was unsuccessful. Geographic analysis of the area conducted in the days following the disappearance revealed the difficulty of the terrain. The roadside drops off into uneven ground, covered in tall grass and cacti. Approximately 1 mile from the truck's location, the Colorado River winds through the landscape. Procedural errors in the initial hours were later scrutinized because the truck was not processed as a location of interest in a criminal matter. No immediate forensic preservation was conducted. The vehicle was towed the following morning, creating a loss of potential evidence from the tires and undercarriage. No scent dogs were deployed within the first critical window of time, which is standard protocol only when a high-risk missing person classification is applied. By the morning of August 9th, when Brandon had not returned home, the status of the case shifted. Family members returned to the location to conduct a daylight search. It was only after the vehicle was moved that the family formally filed a missing person report. This administrative delay meant that formal search and rescue operations did not commence until significantly later in the timeline, allowing environmental factors such as wind and heat to degrade potential physical evidence. The initial official search, conducted by the Coke County Sheriff's Office and assisted by the Texas Rangers, utilized aerial surveillance and ground teams. They focused on a radius around the mile marker where the truck was found. A Department of Public Safety helicopter, equipped with thermal imaging cameras, conducted flyovers of the target zone. The flight logs indicate the search was conducted during daylight hours and again at dusk to maximize the contrast for the thermal sensors. The reports stated that no heat signatures resembling a human form were detected. However, experts noted that the extreme ground temperature during the day, often exceeding 100 degrees Fahrenheit, could mask a heat signature, and the heavy canopy of the mesquite brush could obscure an individual from aerial view. The investigation was further complicated by the lack of physical evidence in the surrounding fields. No articles of clothing or personal effects were recovered during the initial sweeps. The environment, dense with thorny vegetation, usually retains fibers or snags clothing. Yet the search reports from August 2013 document a lack of such findings. Canine units traced a scent trail from the truck that led to the roadway and then abruptly ceased, a detail that initially confused the narrative and led to theories that he may have entered another vehicle. As the immediate window of the incident closed, the case transitioned from an active rescue to a cold investigation. The tangible records, the phone logs, the dispatch recording, and the vehicle location formed the entirety of the established facts. The investigation stalled due to a lack of actionable leads. There were no surveillance cameras on that stretch of Highway 277, and no verified witnesses observed a second vehicle or a pedestrian. The case relied entirely on the interpretation of the auditory data from the emergency call and the conflicting statements regarding Brandon's state of mind prior to his departure. For years, the status of the case remained stagnant. It was categorized administratively as a missing person case with suspicious circumstances. The search area was walked multiple times by private search organizations. These independent efforts often utilized different methodologies than law enforcement, attempting to model the behavior of someone who was disoriented or hiding, expanding the search deeper into the private ranch lands surrounding the highway. In February 2022, nearly a decade after the disappearance, a breakthrough occurred due to a private search effort. A small group of searchers, utilizing new mapping data and working with the permission of local landowners, canvassed an area of heavy brush approximately 1 mile from where the truck had been abandoned. According to their report, they located clothing consistent with what Brandon Lawson was wearing on the night of August 9th, 2013. The discovery of the clothing triggered a renewed procedural response. Local authorities secured the location. The items were photographed in situ and then collected for forensic analysis. The proximity of the clothing to the original site raised questions about the efficacy of the 2013 aerial search. Investigators noted that the density of the brush could have easily shielded the location from thermal imaging. Following the recovery of the clothing, further searches yielded additional biological evidence. While the complete analysis of these findings took time due to the degradation of the materials over 9 years, the identification was eventually confirmed by the University of North Texas Center for Human Identification. The probability of the DNA profile belonging to anyone other than Brandon Lawson was statistically negligible. The medical examiner's report noted that there was no evidence of percussive injury or blunt force trauma on the recovered elements, but the incompleteness of the recovery limited the scope of the findings regarding the specific cause of the loss of life. The context of the Brandon Lawson case is defined by a convergence of mechanical failure, legal evasion, and communication breakdowns. The tangible records create a rigid framework within which a man exited his vehicle and vanished into the brush. The investigation was hampered from the outset by the assumption that the individual did not want to be found. This assumption, driven by the knowledge of the active warrant, delayed the transition from a traffic assist to a rescue operation. The failure to locate Brandon Lawson for 9 years, despite his proximity to the road, underscores the limitations of technology when pitted against complex terrain. The reliance on thermal imaging created a false sense of thoroughness in the early stages. Ultimately, the timeline reveals that the critical window for recovery was exceptionally narrow. Between the time the fuel was exhausted and the battery on the cellular device failed, less than 60 minutes elapsed. During that hour, the individual involved made multiple attempts to communicate his location and his distress. The procedural narrative halts at the edge of the pavement, where the tire tracks ended. The investigation concluded not with a confession or a clear sequence of cause and effect, but with the quiet recovery of evidence that had been waiting in the undergrowth since the night the truck ran dry.